For 7 years, I paid rent to sleep in my parents' basement while my sister lived upstairs for free. Grandpa found out over Thanksgiving dinner and handed my dad the worst night of his life. The lawyer's voice on the phone was calm the way surgeons are calm. Not because nothing is wrong, but because they've seen worse and they know exactly what comes next. "Mr. Ethan," she said, "your grandfather asked me to contact you regarding a financial matter." I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, no couch yet, just a box of dishes I hadn't unpacked, a sleeping bag on the hardwood, and the first silence I'd felt in years. The good kind, the kind that doesn't press against your chest. "What kind of financial matter?" I asked. "There's documentation," she said. "7 years of payments made to your father's household account. The kind of documentation that holds up in court." I didn't say anything for a long moment. Outside my window, a car drove past. A dog barked somewhere 2 floors down. Normal sounds. Free sounds. "How much?" I finally asked. I heard papers shifting. "With interest calculated at the standard rate your grandfather is proposing. $67,200. My back hit the wall behind me. $67,000. That's what 7 years in a basement is worth, apparently. That's what it costs to be the good child. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why a retired electrical contractor named Harold Marsh, my grandfather, Grandpa Hal, put a fork down at a dinner table in rural Ohio and changed the entire course of my life, you need to understand what that dinner table looked like for the 7 years before that night. I moved into my parents' basement when I was 19 years old. That's the part that looks bad on paper, I know. 19-year-old moves into parents' basement. I can already hear the eye rolls. But here's what the headline leaves out. I was working 40 hours a week at a distribution warehouse, taking 2 night classes at the community college, and the apartment I'd been sharing with 2 roommates had just dissolved when one of them skipped out on rent 3 months in a row, and the landlord gave us all 30 days to vacate. I had $340 in my checking account. I was 19. I called my mom. "Of course," she said. "Come home." My dad, Richard, everyone calls him Rich, which my grandfather once said was the most ironic name a man could carry, came to me the second week with what he called a conversation about responsibility. "You're an adult now," he said, standing in the basement doorway. "This isn't a free ride." I told him I understood that. I wanted to contribute. $800 a month, he said. "Covers your share of utilities, upkeep, and the space." I was 19. $800 felt like a fair deal for a place to land. I said okay. I didn't ask for a lease. I didn't ask for a receipt. I didn't ask what upkeep meant exactly, or why the space, a basement with a bathroom that had a leak I fixed myself with YouTube tutorials, was worth $800 a month in a zip code where you could rent a 1-bedroom for $650. I was 19. I trusted my parents. That's the part that will make you either sympathize with me or think I was an idiot. Maybe both are true. My sister Claire was 25 at the time, living in an apartment across town with her boyfriend Marcus. She came over Sundays. She was loud and funny, and she and my mother had the kind of close relationship where they could talk for 3 hours and still not be done. I liked Claire then. I genuinely did. Over the next 2 years, things were fine. Not warm exactly, but functional. I worked. I paid. I saved slowly. I took my classes. I was building towards something. Then Marcus left the first time. Claire showed up at my parents' house with 2 trash bags and her daughter Lily, who was 14 months old, and she moved into her old bedroom upstairs. My mother cried happy tears at the dinner table that night. My dad grilled steaks. Nobody said anything about rent. I want to be precise here because I've been accused of exaggerating this story. So let me just give you the facts, flat and specific, the way my grandfather eventually laid them out at that table. Claire moved back in when Lily was 14 months old. Over the next 6 years, she had another child, a son named Owen, reconciled with Marcus twice, kicked him out twice, took him back a 3rd time, and was, at the time of the dinner I'm about to describe, technically separated from him again while he slept on the couch 3 nights a week. In those 6 years, Claire paid nothing to live in that house. Not rent, not utilities, not groceries. My mother watched both children 5 days a week, full-time, unpaid, which saved Claire approximately $1,600 a month in childcare she never had to think about. I, during that same 6 years, paid $800 a month without a single missed payment. I bought my own food. I paid half the internet bill because my dad decided that was fair. I paid my own phone, my own car insurance, my own everything. I also fixed the furnace once, the basement bathroom twice. I repainted the back deck. I shoveled every driveway snow that fell before 6 a.m. because my dad's back hurt and Claire's children might slip. If you do the math from age 19 to 26, that's 7 years, 12 months each, $800 per month, $67,200. I didn't have a calculator sophisticated enough to hate myself with at the time. I just had a checking account that never got above $3,000 and a growing, nameless feeling that I was losing something I'd never be able to name until it was gone. Then Grandpa came for Thanksgiving. My grandparents didn't visit often. Grandpa Hal and Grandma Irene lived 3 hours away in a house my grandfather had built with his own hands in 1974. I mean that literally. He poured the foundation himself. And at 78 years old, the drive wore him out. But that November, they came. Grandpa Hal is the kind of man who doesn't say much, so when he does speak, the room gets quiet. He has a contractor's hands, wide, scarred, permanently rough, and a habit of watching people the way he probably watched blueprints, looking for where the load was distributed wrong. We sat down to dinner, turkey, green bean casserole, the good china my mother only brought out for performances. I was sitting across from Claire. She was on her phone, texting, one hand absently on Owen's back while Lily fought with her fork 3 inches from Grandma Irene's elbow. Grandpa asked me how work was going. I told him I'd gotten a small raise. Shift supervisor now, 22 an hour. Good, he said. He was cutting his turkey in the precise, careful way he did everything. You saving? And I didn't even think before I answered. It just came out, honest and tired, the way truth gets when you've been carrying it so long it stops feeling heavy and just becomes your normal posture. About 1100, I said. It's slow going. Between rent and utilities, Grandpa's fork stopped. Not dramatically, not in a movie way. It just stopped, halfway between his plate and his mouth, hanging there in the air. Rent, he said. The table was still loud. Owen was fussing. My mother was asking Claire if she wanted more gravy. My father was already on his second glass of wine. Yeah, I said. 800 a month. Grandpa set his fork down, and the table went quiet. Not all at once. It happened the way sound dies when someone turns off a speaker, one layer at a time until there was nothing. Grandma Irene put her hand over her mouth. My father looked up from his wine. You pay them rent? Grandpa said. It's not rent. My mother jumped in, fast, too fast. It's household expenses. I live in the basement, I said, and I don't know why I said it right then, at that moment, but it came out measured and quiet and true. I buy my own food. I pay half the utilities, my own phone, my own insurance. You live in the basement, Grandpa repeated. Not a question. A document being read aloud. Claire's head snapped up from her phone. You make it sound like abuse. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She crossed her arms. Her voice had that specific edge she used when she wanted to make something my fault. I have 2 children, Ethan. You don't pay daycare. Mom watches them 5 days a week. The red hit Claire's face fast. My dad's hand came down on the table. Not hard, but firm. Enough. Grandpa didn't move. He looked at Claire for a long moment, not angry, just reading. And then he said very quietly, "Do you pay anything to live here?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. My dad spoke for her. She's rebuilding. How long? Grandpa said. Has she been rebuilding? Nobody answered that one either. What happened next is the part I've replayed in my head approximately 10,000 times since that night, and it still doesn't feel real. Grandpa pushed his plate away, gently, deliberately. Ethan started paying at 19, he said. His voice was level in the way that ice is flat, smooth on top, capable of cracking under exactly the right weight. Claire is 32, with 2 kids she chose to have and a man she keeps taking back every time he knocks. Claire shot out of her chair so fast it screamed across the floor. How dare you? Sit down. She sat. I want to let that land for a second because I need you to understand. In 32 years, nobody had ever made Claire sit down. Not my father. Not Marcus, who once put his fist through a drywall panel. Not my mother, who was fundamentally incapable of confronting her. My entire life, Claire had stood up whenever she wanted to, walked out of rooms, raised her voice, changed the subject, made someone else feel responsible for her discomfort. She sat down for Grandpa Hal. He turned back to me. Savings, about 1100. He closed his eyes, not in distress, more like a man absorbing a number and deciding what it meant. My dad scoffed. That's because he wastes it. I looked at him. On what, exactly? Games, takeout, whatever you do down there. I haven't bought a game in 2 years, Dad. I cook my own meals because nobody saves me dinner when I work late. Grandma Irene's eyes moved to my mother. My mother looked down at her plate. That small 3-second exchange said everything that had never been said in 7 years. Grandpa stood up. Get your coat. I blinked. What? You're coming with us. My dad erupted out of his chair like a man who'd forgotten his body had rules. Absolutely not. That roof, Grandpa said, his voice dropping to something that wasn't a threat but was adjacent to one, was purchased with money from my father's estate. My money. Don't test my memory, Richard. It was the first time all night my father had absolutely nothing to say. I packed in 15 minutes. 2 duffel bags, 1 backpack. I stood in the middle of the basement, that low-ceilinged, slightly damp room that had been my entire world for 7 years, and I realized that everything I owned fit in 20 minutes. I had been there 7 years, and I hadn't accumulated enough to make leaving hard. That should have broken me. Instead, it felt like a key turning. My mother was crying in the kitchen when I came upstairs. Real tears. I believe that. She's not a cruel woman. She's just the kind of person who makes decisions by not making them, who lets the path of least resistance carve the canyon, and then is genuinely surprised by how deep it got. Claire was on her phone, whispering rapidly to someone. Probably Marcus. Probably already working the angle. My dad stood by the front door with his arms crossed, doing the thing he always did when he felt outmaneuvered, performing authority he no longer had. Walk out tonight, he said. Don't come crawling back when the real world hits you. Grandpa stepped directly between us. The real world, he said to my father, also allows him to keep his dignity. He opened the door. I walked out. 3 texts arrived before we cleared the county line. Dad, you embarrassed your mother. Claire, hope Grandpa enjoys paying for you now. Mom, call me when you calm down. I turned the phone face down on my knee. Grandpa watched me do it in the rearview mirror. He didn't say a word. just drove. Grandma Irene reached back from the passenger seat and put her hand on my knee. One gentle pat. That was it. I had to look out the window for about 10 miles before I trusted my face again. I spent 2 weeks at my grandparents' house. Grandpa Hal's home is the kind of place that does something specific to you when you've been living in a basement. The ceilings are high, the light is generous, and everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Because a man who builds things knows that function and dignity are the same word. He didn't push me. He didn't tell me what to do. He woke up at 5:30 every morning, made coffee, and read the paper at the kitchen table. And if I came down and poured myself a cup, he'd nod, and that was the whole welcome. On the third day, he set a folder in front of me at breakfast. Inside were bank statements, 7 years of transfers from my checking account to a joint account in my parents' names. Every single one. $800, $800, $800. The same as a heartbeat, relentless and regular. I've been watching your account since you moved in, he said. How? I co-signed your first checking account. Your father thought it was for his benefit. A pause. It wasn't. I stared at the statements. 84 payments, $67,200 total. The number didn't feel real. It felt like someone else's loss, the kind of thing you read about in the newspaper and feel sad for and then fold the page. What does this mean? I asked. It means, he said, that I have a very good attorney. I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in December. My name, my account, my security deposit, which Grandpa covered as what he called a retroactive correction. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. There were windows on 2 walls. The ceilings were 9 feet. I stood in the empty living room the day I got the keys, and I felt something I hadn't felt in so long that I didn't even recognize it immediately. I stood there for probably 3 minutes before I realized what it was. It was the feeling of not bracing for anything. Claire called on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after I moved in. I need you Saturday. I'm busy. With what? My life. She laughed. That short, sharp sound she made when she wanted to dismiss something without having to argue it. 1 apartment and suddenly you're too good for us? I'm not too good, Claire. I'm just done. Silence. Then, in a voice that was probably supposed to sound threatening, you'll regret this. I hung up. 30 seconds later, an unknown number called. I almost didn't answer, but something. Maybe the 2 cups of coffee, maybe the particular quality of morning light coming through those 3rd floor windows made me pick up. Mr. Ethan? The voice was measured and professional. Female. The kind of voice that cost $400 an hour. My name is Patricia Dunmore. I'm an attorney in Whitmore County. Your grandfather asked me to reach out regarding a financial matter. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall. I still didn't have a couch. What kind of financial matter? There's documentation of 7 years of payments made to your father's household account, she said. The kind of documentation that tends to hold up quite well in civil court, particularly when paired with evidence that the party receiving those payments represented them as a condition of residency rather than voluntary contributions. My mouth was dry. Is that different legally? Significantly, she said. One is a gift. One is a contract. Contracts have remedies. What kind of remedy? That depends on what your grandfather and you decide you'd like to pursue. A pause. But he asked me to give you a number first, with interest calculated at Ohio's standard rate, $67,200. I didn't say anything for a long time. Mr. Ethan, I'm here. Would you like to set up a meeting? Patricia Dunmore had 17 years of civil litigation experience and a reputation in Whitmore County that my grandfather described as the kind people respect because they've seen her lose once and make someone regret they caused it. She was 52, precise, and had the particular energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed finding the load-bearing wall of an argument and removing it carefully. We met in her office on a Thursday afternoon. Grandpa Hal sat beside me in a brown leather chair that had clearly held him before. Here's what we have, she said, opening a manila folder. Exhibit A, she called it, and I realized she'd already been thinking of this as a case for a while. 7 years of $800 monthly transfers, consistent to the day, from your account to a joint account held by Richard and Susan Marsh. She laid a printed bank statement on the desk, highlighted in yellow, every transaction. Here, she continued, sliding another document, is a text message exchange from June of last year in which your father explicitly reminds you, and I'm paraphrasing, that your continued residency is contingent on maintaining the payments. I remembered that text. He'd sent it when I was 3 days late one month because my paycheck was delayed. This isn't charity, Ethan. We need the payment on time or we have to revisit the arrangement. I'd screenshot it and forgotten about it. Apparently Grandpa hadn't. And here, she said, is a certified letter I've already drafted to your father, informing him that we are prepared to file a civil action seeking recovery of the full amount, plus interest, under Ohio's unjust enrichment doctrine. I looked at Grandpa. He was looking at the documents with the same expression he used for blueprints, methodical, satisfied with sound architecture. They can fight it, I said. They can try, Patricia said. But I want to show you something else. She slid one more page across the desk. It was a property record, my parents' house, purchased in 1997. The down payment, $14,000, had come from an account held by Harold and Irene Marsh. When your grandparents contributed to that down payment, Patricia explained, there was an understanding, not a formal lien, but a documented understanding in a letter your grandfather kept, that the property would be managed managed responsibly, and any financial arrangements within the household would be reasonable. Grandpa finally spoke. I wrote that letter the week they signed the mortgage. Richard never asked what it meant. He assumed it meant I was being generous. He paused. I was being careful. I stared at the letter. It was dated 1997. Grandpa had been careful since 1997. What happens now? I asked. Patricia folded her hands. We give them 2 weeks to respond to the demand letter. If they agree to a repayment arrangement, we settle. If they don't, she let the sentence breathe. We file, and the filing becomes public record. The demand letter went out on a Friday. By Monday morning, my father had called me 4 times. I let all 4 go to voicemail. Voicemail 1. Ethan, this is absurd. Call me. Voicemail 2. Your grandfather is stirring up trouble for no reason. This is a family matter. Voicemail 3. Long silence then. Your mother is upset. I hope you're proud of yourself. Voicemail 4. Look, we can talk about this. There's no reason to involve lawyers. Claire texted twice. First, do you have any idea what you're doing to this family? Second, Marcus says you're being manipulated by an old man. I saved all of them, forwarded them to Patricia. Perfect, she said. Keep saving everything. Then my mother called. I answered that one. I don't fully know why. Maybe because her crying on Thanksgiving night had been real, and I hadn't been able to forget it. Ethan, she said, her voice thick. Please, Mom, this is going to destroy everything. I leaned against my kitchen counter and looked out the window at a gray January sky. Mom, do you know how much I've paid over the years? Silence. $67,000, Mom, since I was 19. More silence. I didn't. Your father handled... I know, I said. That's the part that probably hurts most, honestly. She started to say something else. I told her I loved her. I told her to talk to Patricia if she wanted to discuss the settlement. Then I hung up. My hands were perfectly steady. That steadiness surprised me more than anything else about that whole period. The settlement negotiation took 11 days. My father hired an attorney, a man named Gerald Foss, who Patricia later described to me as competent and appropriately defeated. And the 4 of them spent a week and a half negotiating over speakerphones and email chains while I went to work and came home to my apartment and slept in an actual bed with actual windows showing me actual sky. My father's position, initially, was that the payments were voluntary contributions to household expenses, not rent, and therefore not recoverable. Patricia's position was that the text messages, the consistency of payment, the conditions attached to residence, and my grandfather's property letter together painted a picture that Gerald Foss was not going to enjoy presenting to a judge. Gerald Foss apparently agreed with that assessment because on day 11, he called Patricia and said his clients were prepared to settle. The number they came back with first was $15,000, spread over 5 years. Patricia called me to deliver it with what I can only describe as professional amusement in her voice. Should I laugh at them? She said. Or would you prefer to? Tell them, I said, that we'll see them in court. 3 days later, Gerald Foss called again. $42,000, lump sum. Patricia countered at $60,000 over 18 months. They settled at $55,000, structured as $10,000 immediately and $2,500 per month for the following 18 months. My father signed the agreement on a Thursday afternoon in February. I wasn't in the room. Patricia called me afterward and read me the terms in her measured attorney voice, and I sat on the floor of my apartment. I had a couch by then, but old habits, and stared at the ceiling. It's done, she said. Yeah, I said. Are you all right? I thought about it genuinely. I think so. Yeah, your grandfather wanted me to tell you something when this concluded. What? She paused, and I got the sense that even Patricia Dunmore, 17 years of civil litigation, found this particular message worth noting. He said, the house is his, but the foundation was mine. I just reminded everyone which one holds the weight. 6 months later, in the small but specific way that life recalibrates after a seismic event, things had settled into a new shape. My parents were still in their house. The $55,000 settlement came partly from a refinanced home equity line, which meant my father was paying me back using a house that Grandpa Hal's 1997 down payment had helped build. There's a geometry to that I still appreciate. Claire and Marcus had reconciled again. I know this because my mother told me on one of our now bi-weekly phone calls. We were finding our way back to something. It wasn't what we'd had, but it was more honest. She had stopped defending and started apologizing, which was slow and imperfect and real. I'd started taking classes again, a 2-year program in electrical engineering technology. Grandpa's influence maybe, or maybe just the thing that finally had room to grow. I had savings for the first time in my adult life. Real savings. Not the scraping along kind, but the kind that feel like ground under your feet. I had a couch. I had plants. I had a neighbor named Delilah who knocked one Saturday morning to ask if I wanted to split a pizza order, and I said yes, and that turned into a standing thing that I was still figuring out what to call. I hadn't heard from Claire directly since she texted me about Marcus, and Grandpa Hal called every Sunday. Not long calls. He wasn't a long call man. 10 minutes, maybe 15. He'd ask about work, about school, about whether I'd fixed the dripping faucet I'd mentioned 2 weeks before. One Sunday in July, near the end of the call, I said, Grandpa, why did you keep those bank statements for 7 years? A pause. I kept them, he said, because I've been building things long long enough to know that a foundation problem doesn't fix itself. You document it, you wait for the right moment, and then you correct it before the whole structure comes down. Another pause. I should have corrected it sooner, he said. I'm sorry it took that long. I had to let that sit for a second. It's okay, I said. It's not, he said, but it's better now. He was right on both counts.